Welcome to episode 11 of Paranormal Unwrapped with Krista Raisa and Jack Roth. Krista is a channel for the Orion Council, teacher, and creatress. Jack is an investigative journalist, author, and award-winning filmmaker. In this segment, we're discussing corruption and cover-ups. Does the world have PTSD? The ETs wouldn't be here if we didn't need some kind of help. Is that right? What do you think? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Krista.
Hi. This is hard talk. I know it's not an easy planet.
It's
but
tough,
we're here.
yeah. Especially right after Christmas week, right?
Oh yeah, Christmas has got to be emotionally somehow a big challenge. You know, I got some negative messages around Christmas. I did from
Whoa.
people. Yeah.
Well, I think people are stressed, like it just because of the way mainstream society makes Christmas. Christmas should just be about love, hanging out with family and friends, eating good food, right? But, it gets all stressy. but I love the topic today. And I love the idea that, the kind of what we're talking about is a huge topic. But we'll get to a little of it at least and kind of banter back and forth a little bit. So,
what have you been discovering about power cover-ups? Just to give people an idea of where we're focused, how high up the pyramid have you gone in your research?
Sure. And I've been researching this particular topic over the last couple months. I've always been interested in, the phrase conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorists is now a negative thing all of a sudden. So if you believe in any kind of conspiracy, that you're automatically a nut job, but that's not true at all. I think when you look at history and you go back in history, that conspiracy is part of the human condition. And it all stems from, the definition of conspiracy is when more than one person or a group of people with power conspire to create and something that they desire, and they usually cover it up. It involves corruption. It involves criminal acts. And this is conspiracy is a thing. So, and it is a very common thing in human history. You can go way back to, people conspire for all types of reasons. But when people become powerful, they feel there's an elitist kind of attitude. And there's also a kind of an attitude of a privileged kind of attitude where this is, I was meant to do this and I'm justified because I'm kind of better than everyone else. I'm more powerful. I have more money. And therefore I want to control everything and everybody else. Mm-hmm. And I know you've looked into kind of the, pathology of this, like a lot of times when people say, and there's a lot of presidents in the past and powerful people who have been narcissists, egomaniacs, bipolar, sociopaths. I mean, and a lot of leaders throughout time, including our own country. Yeah. Lyndon Johnson was a narcissist. J. Edgar Hoover was. Richard Nixon was the ultimate narcissist. Donald Trump's a major narcissist. So, we see this today in the way people act. But you are interested. I know you had mentioned narcissism, and I got excited because that is a big part of it.
Yeah, the narcissist is a huge trending topic right now on the internet, which I want to bring up because the internet is still very young. If you remember, I remember life before the internet happened, and just in more recent years has this conspiracy blown up, online, where we are just bombarded in this information age. And naturally, people are already skeptical towards major institutions. I remember going to college in Finland and learning, okay, this is a business institution, and your thesis is going to make money for this company that you're calling a university. And then going to the United States, a lot of young people are choosing not to go to college here. They don't want to get in debt. Mm-hmm. And this whole structure is being examined through on the individual level, and individuals are able to reach larger and larger groups. So I'm just thinking, if I were in power, I'd be kind of nervous. It's like you could get exposed, people recording corrupt police officers with their cell phones, people going to jail, people are losing credibility, because it's all being revealed, but it's just the beginning. So my research has found that we have just finished this thing called Kali Yuga, which Hindus, when they map out time, it, their system of mapping in the Vedic texts, which are ancient thousand-year texts, suggests that this planet is really, really super, super old. And what that means is that the history books are wrong, or they need to be updated. Things that we're told are lies in the media, because bad news sells 15 times more than good news sell. And so now you have to have facts, you have to do research, which is time and money. You have to have an intelligence with language to write. You have to be able to read. And so it takes a lot of energy just to, I think, expose like one topic. So when I talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, it's been suggested that this planet is suffering psychologically since World War II, and there have been minor wars. But in recent studies on violence, they found that in the last 200 years, violence levels have gone down. Why? Because of things like reading and education. So people who are violent have less frontal lobe activity. They have less analytical capacity. They can't self-reflect. Violent people. And also, this is when creativity gets repressed. So when you are condemning naturally creative people, that's been a part of the control as well. How do you see the major corruption?
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's really interesting what you said about it seems to be almost like a generational. I think older people, perhaps, say baby boomers or older than that, they tend to be more trusting of institutions. So they'll trust the government, they'll trust big business, they'll trust the church, right? Religion, more than millennials for sure, and then and generations even younger than millennials are very aware of corruption and conspiracy. And, here's the thing though, that, people say, oh, well, conspiracy, you're a nut job if you think something is a conspiracy, but that's just so erroneous. It's so wrong, because I ask people this, if I believe with everything we know now, here's something people don't realize, and we still get this. We get comments here today, I'm sure, if we talk long enough about it. Well, they'll say, Oswald acted alone. It's been proven that Oswald acted alone in the Kennedy assassination. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. And what they don't realize is, in 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations came to the conclusion that there was a probable conspiracy in the assassination of JFK. So that shouldn't even be what we're talking about anymore. It's, yes, there was a conspiracy, but now we need to figure out who exactly was involved in that conspiracy. But the problem is when you say, you were talking about how people in power should be scared because, they can get exposed even more so than ever in today's day and age. The problem is they still have the power to cover it up. They still have the power to coerce, to intimidate, to do physical bodily damage to people, to eliminate people if need be. And people think this is all like fantasy, but it's absolutely a reality. This has been going on for thousands of years. So very powerful people, they have to have the power not only to play the conspiracy out, they have to have the power to cover it up. Now, sometimes they don't. Like in Watergate, good investigative journalists went to work and they were able to uncover the Watergate scandal. Nixon was one of these typical guys. He was a narcissist. He was power hungry. He was a bully. But Nixon was a bully. He was a bad person. But this is what we're dealing with. And people in power tend to be these kind of people, unfortunately. So, yeah, it's this really strange. But what is the cost of that, right, Chris? Like you say, what is the cost to society? What is the cost of that to Earth, to Mother Earth? What kind of post-traumatic negative stuff? Are we all dealing with it because we've been exposed to that kind of negative behavior?
Yeah, there are definitely genetic implications. Oh, there's a gene code that is called avoid and deny. So then there's also a worship gene, Billy Carson found in his research. And this, if you look into Sasha Lesson's work, he hope to get him on the show. He knows the entire history of the Anunnaki from Nibiru. And so the stuff that we're undoing is, in theory, 300,000 years old of genetic manipulation. And that has gone through every major society, and not all those major societies lasted. But there have been beings that have been more submissive, genetically more submissive to power structures. So naturally, supposedly, these groups have been rewarded. So if you look at just celebrity culture, for example, the bad behavior gets rewarded. And so young people think that, oh, they should be that way. And I wrote about this in my book, Starring You, a Self-Love Guide, is, when you look at a rock star, this is just a crude example. You always see a rock star smashing a guitar. All right. And I feel like this is a sort of a metaphor for what we're taught. We're shown images, right? And we're constantly being shown images, like in Clockwork Orange, when they hold his eyeballs open and show him all these upsetting films to kind of program him. This is where the individual has to take responsibility, because Sonia Choquette, spiritual teacher, explains she channeled this, we create our reality in images. So your capacity to visualize is a lot more powerful for your personal reality than you know. And so we go through these institutions and we're fed all of this stuff. And if your teachers and your educators are not taking a personal responsibility, as I say, if you don't have at least one cause that you're passionate about changing, you're totally useless. You're just a consumer. Right. And the same goes for the conspiracy news. Is we've got to do. So like, what can we do when you get that conspiracy news? What is your reaction to that? I always felt in schools, something has to be done. I have to leave the school so I can go change the world.
Right.
And a lot of people, I just noticed this kind of they lack this motivation to do anything.
Yeah, and it's part of the human condition. That's what we're dealing with, and that's the problem. Human beings are flawed, right? So you have good human beings, but unfortunately, you have a lot of pretty shitty human beings. You have people who just don't want to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. They don't, and this is why humanity has been what it has been over the last, 10,000 years. I mean, it's you can say, well, what do you do? So what I like to tell people is, be a free thinker. Think for yourself. Don't listen to what anyone else says. Don't listen to the mainstream media. Don't listen to what authority tells you. Find out for yourself. And then if you find out it's true, then it's true. But if you find out it's not true, well, then you know it's not true. But you have to find out for yourself. And I think there's a lot of people that, again, human nature, some people just like to be led. They like to be led by leaders. They don't care. They just want to be submissive. But I think people like us who are free thinkers, who are not going to put up with nonsense from people, and we have a problem with authority because of that we are the biggest threat to their power structure, because we're the ones who question it. It's like, what are you telling us? That makes no sense at all. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So they hate that, right? They hate when people think for themselves, which is why people are it's almost like they're zombified, right? You wake up in the morning, the mainstream media, it's all this just useless nonsense that you hear, right? And you're just sitting there watching nonsense, and it's not really what you should be thinking about at all as a human being.
How do you find, for example, a peer-reviewed articles, and do you have a recommendation for how people can find trustworthy media?
Well, again, I think you just have to do your media is tough, and I've just started looking into this. So for me, the mainstream media is off limits. You have to try to find independent news sources that don't have an agenda, right? That aren't owned by big business, that aren't owned by either a extreme right wing or extreme left wing person, right? Let's try to keep politics out of it, right? So we don't want to condemn one side or the other in the way they think. Whether you think like a fascist or you think like a communist, it's really not the point. The point is that you want to. We're talking about finding the truth. That the truth means everything. So try to find those independent news sources, and also good researchers, good investigative journalists. They're all out there. They do years and years of research, and they write books, really good books that aren't slanted, that they just, and you have to determine for yourself what makes sense. Use your intuition. Krista, I know it's intuition, right? Intuition is a huge part of some of us that we don't use enough. Use your intuition. If something smells rotten, it's probably rotten. I mean, that's what I would tell people, and it's hard in the world we live in because there's so much fabricate. I hate fake news because Donald Trump made that word up and it's ridiculous. But the fact of the matter is that, people manipulate, politicians manipulate that way. That's how they're able to manipulate people, saying something's fake news, not fake news, the truth, not the truth. But a lot of these politicians are pathological liars. That's another part of the pathology of conspirators, is they're pathological liars. You got to be able to lie and make it seem like you're telling the truth. Right? So you got to be a really good liar. And these people are the best liars in the world. So,
and this is why it might sound, people want you to think spirituality is crazy. These people want you to think intuition and third eye is hippie nonsense. But no, I have researched tons and tons of texts from individuals who no one really knows about. And I've researched the afterlife. And interesting fact, countries that don't teach about reincarnation, mainly European countries, they have the highest suicide rates. So in these whole, why we talk about NDE, why we talk about OBE, is there is consistent evidence that suggests we have a physical, astral, and spiritual body, and you basically come back around. So if these evil people on this planet knew that as a result of their evil acts, they end up in a really bad place. So technically what I'm saying is the heaven hell thing is technically correct. It's very black and white, what religion teaches, but due to the nature of their realities, they will find themselves in a place that is very similar to the world they have created around themselves while here in physical form. And they think this is all nonsense. They incarnate into lineages where these disgusting rituals have been taking place, shadow government, all that stuff. It's in their families. So they're taught from childhood. And
they're indoctrinated to think they're elite, and they be doing these horrible things because they are meant to do it, and they're doing, somehow it's good for humanity where it's only good for them.
And you see these people are fritzing. So celebrities like Kanye and Britney and Perry or whoever, why do they go to the same rehabilitation center? And when they flip out, people talk about this MK Ultra, and I had to after I had these extraterrestrial experiences, I had to start researching all this stuff. I didn't know I didn't know about the conspiracy going on. It was kind of introduced of all the stuff that happened, how in the 60s the postal service was corrupt, all sorts of stuff, how war makes the economy better, and you're just like, kids now are like, oh my God, this planet is insane.
Yeah, well, you mentioned MK Ultra. MK Ultra is not a conspiracy theory. MK Ultra is a fact. It happened. People know this. The CIA has already admitted it, that starting after World War II, they brought over Nazi scientists who were working on mind control programs, and they just put them right into the CIA, into our intelligence agencies, and they started doing the same experiments. They did it on, they used human beings as guinea pigs. They unknowingly gave people LSD and other drugs, psychedelic drugs, to see how they can control the mind. Again, what's the main word there? Control. It's all about control. They want to control everyone. So this is something with people. Oh, MK Ultra, that's your conspiracy nut. No, I'm not. MK Ultra was real. Look it up. I mean, this is something that's been, recognized as fact. The CIA admitted, yeah, we were doing this kind of stuff in the 60s and 70s. What they don't say is they're still doing it, right? As long as, oh, that was in the past, but they don't tell you to the extent and what they were actually using people as guinea pigs, and people died because of this, and that's the kind of thing. And like you say, but I looked into MK Ultra, what were they trying to do to people, and it's extremely disturbing.
Yeah, that's another controversial topic. The earth plants that have been used, that people have been manipulated with the use of psychedelics. There are institutions in Switzerland now, like modern people who are converting old castles to healing centers because they found that it lights up more areas of the brain. And there are videos on YouTube with the soldiers on LSD. They start laughing and becoming peaceful, and the housewives, they're having these total moments of enlightenment. So of course these sorts of medicines are not allowed, and you have people pushing stuff like cocaine and that sort of thing.
Right.
Like why you're right. Why do they promote rap music to Black people with these sorts of stupid lyrics? Cocaine damages your amygdala, which is your empathic sensor in your brain. And sociopaths have a damaged amygdala. They cannot sense their own emotions. They cannot empathize with other people. They don't have feelings of remorse. And it's like Wendy Williams talked about, you're on coke for 14 years, that damage that it does. And when you meet these individuals, it's a very, very sad story I wrote about in my book, Starseed Survival, just a couple chapters. And they found in recent research in the National Institute of Health is that chronic exposure to stress affects the DNA in the brains of mice. And stress is the cause of about 80% of illness. So if you're constantly bombarding people with upset and drama and stuff that doesn't lead to anything, the people produce more cortisol. And so why do they teach meditation to Vietnam War veterans? These people are highly, highly stressed, psychologically traumatized. And this is why we talk about ETs, is because, in my opinion, this planet needs a lot of help. We have a huge, huge cleanup job to do. That's why they're around. So, my next question is, why aren't they landing? Why aren't they coming here? They have the technology, like Stan Romanek, they melted the nuclear warheads. They have the technology to do that. And I think they've been waiting for a very long time. There have been these windows and opportunities for us to ascend. And so I guess a lot of my viewers are concerned with being in this quote unquote correct ascension timeline. Like, a lot of good, quote unquote, good souls are tired of this. Like, they want out of this planet because this is like a crazy, crazy planet. But apparently there's something here worth saving. Like, there's some kind of goodness that's worth protecting, which otherwise we wouldn't come here. So I think the illusion of, this is just me talking, I think the illusion is that these people are all powerful and can do whatever they want. But I'm just talking at it from a spiritual perspective. We have a rational perspective. We have an emotional perspective. It's very multifaceted how and why these things happen. And but with the violence study, they found that the nonviolent protests were more effective than the violent ones. So if you don't like that news reporter, okay, I'm just gonna smack him over the head with a boot. It's like that's less effective than 30 people meditating in protest of something that just happened. I find that really, really interesting, because we're taught to believe it's otherwise. We're taught to believe in you have to arm yourself, like in a gated community with spikes coming out. But,
right, but that's what they want. That's what they want you to do, right? The whole idea, again, we go back to control, and what you said is so true. It's like they want to knock us off our natural spiritual path, our natural spiritual development in this lifetime. And like you said, the negative and if you listen to the news, it's all about violence and death and drugs and crime and just nonsense. That's all negative. And even when you listen to the weather anymore, it's negative because now we have to deal with, climate change. So there's nothing that, and you hear about sports, about all these, misbehaving athletes who make way too much money, so everything's really a negative at this point. So it's throwing us off what I would say our natural spiritual path. But they're doing it again. If we're fighting with each other and they're manipulating if they're manipulating the world in a way where we are constantly at odds with each other, right? Mm-hmm. Christians against Muslims, right? Palestinian against Jew, U.S. versus against Russian, all these different things, right? Communists against democratic society. They win because they keep us fighting with each other, and they prevent us from focusing on our real development, which is spiritual. And if everyone was on the right path spiritually, they would automatically lose their power. They wouldn't be able to hold on to that power and control anymore.
And they're already in cahoots with the alternative currencies, gold-backed currencies. The major superpowers are actually working with each other. It's not getting reported, but because of the open trade, for a long time we didn't have open trade. The countries are still closed off with economically, and that is changing. So I just recommend for people to read international newspapers, read what other countries are talking about, not just like don't just be nationalist in your country. What are they saying on the other side of the ocean? And also, I had a brain fart.
That's all right.
Total brain fart.
I saw where you were going with that. No, but again, this is it's. I think what you're getting at is that. So how do we kind of pull together? How do we make a paradigm shift? Right? Where is that critical mass of people coming together? Especially with the younger generation saying, hey, we've had enough of this, man. We're tired of it. We're tired of war. We're tired of that whole, the war equation, right? War is a racket. It's been making, war profiteers very wealthy for a long, long time.
Yeah, we in school we learned about the Irish Revolution and how Ireland became independent. And they have a street in Dublin called O'Connell Street. So Daniel O'Connell was a famous lawyer, and he affected the monetary system that changed the value of their dollar. And so this was a major shift. So he's behind the scenes working the system, while you had you had Yeats, W.B. Yeats, and poets, and the quote unquote the young people, the romantics, who are out there kind of waving the flags, making ruckus. But my partner and I, we don't recommend that you go to major cities and protests, because these are kind of dangerous when you're in a crowded. A friend of mine, he tripped on acid on the East Coast, and he said he saw the layouts of the cities and how they're structured like in case, kind of like a Hunger Games. It sounds so terrible, but it's like structured in case of some sort of major evacuation. It's like they can manipulate and like kind of like cattle. And right. So that's why I do not recommend, if you hate the president, I don't recommend going and protesting in the street. Is you, like I said, just a peaceful, Natalia Tolkonikova, she was in prison for doing art in Moscow. She says, create an art crime. And it's basically you disagreeing in a creative way. And so, artists in the past were seen as major threats. They were imprisoned, and now they're flourishing. So whatever your medium is like, make the decision to anchor it, and especially in the spiritual community. It's like, it's easy to get blissed out into, because you've activated your higher circuitry and you've moved beyond the sort of animal-based instinct of fight or flight, dominant, submissive, I'm safe or I'm not safe, and utilize those downloads you get they say it's really hard to bring in the information from the spiritual realm. That's actually the work. So if you can put it on a piece of paper, if you can put two and two together, synchronize your brain hemispheres, you're a lot more useful than someone just, ranting and raving, with a broken beer bottle. It's it's that it's that putting the paintbrush on the canvas and sharing it with something else, because we're not here to be alone. And what these movies are saying is that, and oh my gosh, we've totally gone over time. Oh no, we've got to end the show.
It's been a great conversation. I mean, this is good stuff. So
yeah, this was a great conversation. Everyone had so much to say.
But I agree. Peaceful protest is the greatest threat to authority, right? That's why Martin Luther King was such a threat. And Martin Luther King's FBI profile was thousands of pages. I mean, Martin Luther King was a threat to authority. So yeah, that's just a perfect example.
And Malcolm X, he learned in the end, he was very militant and about his group, just Black Panther only, basically. And then he realized he's got to include everyone to have that
Right.
strength. So be rainbow, be colorful, be international. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks so much. Thanks, Jack. Appreciate your work.